Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Matura Express. My name is Karina, and tonight's topic is, well, everything that has to do with agreement, disagreement, and so on and so forth. Okay, in the intro or in the very beginning, you saw the title of tonight's stream. It's too long for me to remember. The plan is that I will give you some vocab on how to express your opinion, which is mainly synonyms for the good old I think. Then I will show you some phrases or some chunks rather that you can use for agreement and disagreement. I will firstly try to tell you why this is important. Because otherwise the whole thing is like it would only be vocabulary kind of without context. In your exams, as you probably know, I guess it depends on how far in your Matura preparation course you are. I don't know how much you know about what the exam will look like. The first part will be a monologue, so it will only be you talking, with more or less no interference from your interlocutors. I guess that they will ask you a couple of questions in case you get stuck, but I don't know for sure. That is something that you should ask your interlocutors. But the second part will be a dialogue and a follow-up discussion. So the dialogue you will still, you will be given a role, and for the dialogue you will still be in that role, and you will discuss the topic from usually you are the expert on something perspective, and the interlocutors will kind of try to throw you off the track by asking some questions on the topic, not rebutting what you say, but at least raise some skepticism about what you said in your monologue task. And it is quite important for you to be able to express agreement and disagreement. This also has to do with culture. You're doing an English exam. Well, English discussions, English negotiations, English dialogues, more or less, when they take place on a higher register, when they're kind of formal, they tend to be very polite. Business negotiations in England tend to be a very polite thing. So as soon as people discuss something or talk to each other about something, they would probably, in case of disagreement, they would probably not just say, well, you're wrong. That is not what British politeness would, allow them to do. They would always be kind of like, well, yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I can see your point, but, and then. So this is something that you should do in your exams as well. You would not want to just basically say, well, to your interlocutors, well, you're wrong. That is not how polite dialogues work. So yeah, long story, short point really. I will give you some vocab, some chunks on how to do that, or I will try to do so. And also one point that we must never forget is that the more vocab you have, the more points you get in the scale that says range of vocabulary, one of the 4 scales that you will get grades on in your exam. So you get points or grades, depending on how you see it, from 0 to 10. And the more vocab you know, the more points you get, and the more accurately you can use them, the more points you get, obviously. But I'm pretty sure you know that. And there's probably also a stream on the assessment scale on how the grades are put together. Is there? Yeah, probably.
I'm doing this.
Perfect.
Next week.
So there we go. Next week, that's the time to for you to be back. Chris will be talking about grades and assessment and so on and so forth. And everything I'm saying will suddenly start to make a lot more sense. Okay, so that's what a dialogue, what a task could look like. In this task, you don't see the role that you have, but it was one of the tasks that I put together. And the situation basically says, well, you know a lot about sports. You're also, like, you go to the gym regularly. You also exercise a lot, and your friends like keep asking you questions about a healthy lifestyle and sports. So you're the expert basically, and what you did in the monologue was you held a presentation on the benefits of sports and the benefits of a healthy lifestyle in general. So not only sports as like basically the umbrella topic, but there was also like health and nutrition, like the link and so on. So that's what you did in your monologue part, giving us some pieces of advice on how to include sports and healthy nutrition into like the daily routine of a person who is working, who's going to university, and who does not have that much time. After the dialogue, so that's what we will be doing towards the end, so after the vocab, there's a discussion going on between you and the students in the situation. That's what you see on the screen. In real life, it will be, or in your exam situation, real life, it will be you and your interlocutor discussing the issue. You are still in the role of the expert, and you will have to defend your point, basically. After that, in the follow-up discussion, you and your interlocutors will be talking about sports and health in general. You being you again, and your attitude and whatever you do, and well, maybe you can also get some like discussion going on that point. Maybe not, depends on the topic, I guess. That conversation and the very last sentence in follow-up discussions are in red because they underline that the whole thing should really be an active discussion, as like lifelike as it gets in an exam situation. They are going, so they are the interlocutors, are going to ask you some questions, and you should ask them some questions too. So it should really be a discussion and also some going back and forth in like an exchange of opinions, basically. That was the word I was looking for. So here's some vocab on how you can express an opinion. That is not only I think, or the good old I believe. Like sometimes people think that the only synonym for I think they need is belief. These are chunks, so they're incomplete sentences. You have to like extend them and complete them in whatever way you want, or whatever suits the purpose, I guess. So I will just quickly talk you through some of them, try and give you some more or less intelligent example sentences. Well, the first point is clear, I believe, or I concluded for myself, conclude, Schlussfolgern, can be used in more tricky topics where you are asked for opinions on something that is not that obvious, maybe. Well, I concluded for myself that joining an organization like Greenpeace would be a good thing, but I can totally see if there's people who don't really believe in like the system. Something like that. You concluded for yourself, so that was the punchline that you drew for yourself. But you kind of leave open the space for like different opinions. After careful consideration, which is one of my all-time favorites. I say that all the time in exams. I don't know whether or not they like it, but I do. That is a really complicated sentence. You could probably leave out the second part and note down for you, like in your vocabulary books, or for you as some vocab to use after careful consideration, because the rest of the sentence is just really long. And in the exam, you're not allowed full sentences anyway. You're only allowed keywords on your like keyword sheet. So I guess I came to think of it as the main issue is a little bit too much, but little over the top. I got carried away, obviously. So after careful consideration, I came to the conclusion that I would not like to join an organization like Greenpeace because. So you're expressing an opinion as well. Again, leaving open that your interlocutors may be of a different opinion, which is always, a good thing. You should always kind of show that you know that there's always a pro and a con. It's never like black or white kind of thing. According to zufolge, helps you expressing opinions that might not be totally your own, like opinions that you stole from someone and that you can then like comment on. According to the expert in my text, joining Greenpeace is a bad idea because, but I think that, so you could, you could quote somebody else and then go from his or her opinion and say, well, yeah, totally agree, no, don't agree. I suppose, and I guess, ich nehme an, ich schätze, also quite good, pretty much synonyms for I believe, and I guess you don't have to know all of them. It would just be useful if you could replace the good old I think with at least 1 or 2 different options. Wortwiederholungen are an issue in spoken language as well, especially in an exam where they test you on vocab skills, because knowing some synonyms proves that you have done your homeworks, like that you did studies on vocab. In my opinion and in my eyes, they are like synonyms as well. So is, in my view, sorry, I skipped one. In my view, like in my opinion and in my eyes, they are 99% synonyms. In my view, world politics are definitely an issue that should be taught in school. For example, if the topic is education, and if the question is whether or not we should teach more politics in school, like quite a frequent topic, something that is definitely an issue. So you may want to use one of those. You could also use them like kind of contradicting the person. So if the interlocutor says, well, I don't know, his or her standpoint is that politics should not be taught in school, that is something that we should, well, kind of like knowledge that we should acquire by ourselves. You could just say, well, yeah, in my view or in my opinion, I think that it would be a good thing. So as a kind of polite way of saying that your view does not correspond with the view of the person you're talking to. It seems to me that politics is an issue that is sometimes overlooked. Very handy. As soon as you want to kind of start a new point, a new opinion, you should always let your interlocutors know where in your presentation you are, where in German or in written text you have paragraphs, you have absätze to kind of mark a new idea. You should definitely let your audience know that you're starting with a new point. And it seems to me that is always a good thing, always a good one. It seems to me that XY would be a point worth being discussed, whatever, something like that. From my perspective or from my point of view, self-explanatory. As far as I'm concerned, and it goes without saying that, as far as I'm concerned, always introduces some personal standpoint, also maybe a contradiction or like a rebutting of what the other person said. The interlocutor says something like, well, he or she, I don't know, gets all the knowledge about politics from newspapers, and you could say, well, as far as I'm concerned, I work a lot like with social media because they give me instant news. I'm up to date all the time, instantly, basically, like, you see the point, I think. And it goes without saying that is more, well, you can basically only use it if you're 100% sure of your opinion and if you want to emphasize that you are. It goes without saying that politics is one of the most important topics of the 21st century, of all times, whatever. If you say something like it goes without saying, as I said, you should be quite sure about you being right. Otherwise, it is too strong for like a I think opinion. It has to be like a I'm 100% sure of it opinion kind of thing. A quick recap. I'm just gonna leave them on for a second. These words and all the others that I will give you in a second. If I were you, I would write down or note down a few of them, like the ones that you can work with, the ones that you like see a chance that you can remember them. Also, I would write them down on the keyword sheets because spontaneously it is hard to think about so many things in an oral exam situation. You have to say something decently intelligent. You should also use linking devices and good vocab and so on and so forth. You're allowed keywords, so you could just as well write them down. Agreement, the whole layout of my page is a bit weird. Anyway, there's more to come. It's not only 3, but it's on the 2nd page for some reason. Agreement, so you can, of course, agree with what the interlocutor says. Has the one disadvantage that it doesn't give you an awful lot of speaking time. If you agree, you agree. That's it. There's nothing to discuss. You will definitely have situations like that where you can just simply say, well, yeah, I totally agree, and that's it. But, well, disagreeing is easier, gives you more to talk about. I totally agree is probably the standard one, and we're trying to find some synonyms for that. I couldn't agree more. That's something that you hear a lot, or at least my host parents and so on, and some people I met on holiday always say or said that. I couldn't agree more with you on that point. So that is usually the sentence ends after that. I couldn't agree more with you on that, so that is kind of expressing, well, yeah, we do agree. Total match in opinions here. Absolutely and precisely. Something that you could also use as kind of a discourse marker in speech. Stuff like that in the beginning of the sentence gives you some time to think about what to say. The dialogue is spontaneous. You don't really have time to plan it. The interlocutors might catch you off guard, like they might ask you a question that you were not prepared for. Stuff like that gives you some time to think, well, I absolutely agree with you, but, and in the meanwhile, you better come up with a good idea of what to say. So that is stuff that gives you time, a little bit at least. Stuff that is very, very idiomatic, that is very used, okay, I start this sentence again. That is used very frequently in spoken English. There we go. I see your point. I see where you're getting at. Or the one that I used a second ago. I see where you're coming from. That is very idiomatic, very English, and definitely states that you agree with the person that you're talking to. I would go along with that view to a point. Now we're going down on the scale. You agree, but not a 100%. So you could introduce some disagreement, some different opinions. I'd go along with that to a point, but I have also read about a different approach. I have talked about a different approach with some of my colleagues. So you're kind of, introducing a new aspect. That's a good point. Fact, end of story. That's a good point, but would then be, well, yeah, I can totally see that you're right too, but there's something else. I see exactly what you mean, and oh, that's convincing. Well, yeah, they both don't really leave that much space for disagreement. This is really agreeing with what the other person said. Okay, that's convincing. I didn't think of it that way, but now you managed to kind of convince me of your point. I see your point, I see what you're getting at. Yeah, especially the I see what you're getting at kind of thing is, as I said, you read and hear that quite frequently. I follow a lot of discussions in English that go, or that are out there on social media. That's stuff that you really read quite a bit. So if you want to sound like a native, that's what you do. Disagreement, as I said, leaves more room for discussions, but is maybe a bit harder in practice because, first of all, if you disagree with a person, you have to let him or her know that you disagree, and you have to make sure that you disagree in a very polite way. You can't just say, well, you're wrong and I'm right, and that's it, end of story. That's not how things work, at least not in an exam situation. But, well, you can then explain yourself, which gives you valuable minutes in speaking. Same as with the agreement, but now turned into something that expresses that that you are not of the opinion of your opposite. I see your point, but, and I see what you're getting at, but I made a totally different experience, but from what experience taught me, or from what experience showed me, it's not the way you think, basically. Some part agreement, or at least conceding that the other person has a point as well. That's one way of looking at it. However, I made a different experience. However, I think about it a little differently. However, one of those really great linking words that means jedoch. Why can I actually write on the pad in PDF and not in Word? That's weird. Anyway. That is weird and exceeds my computer skills by far. I completely disagree. I don't know why it's on the sheet, really. You shouldn't say it that directly, I guess, because complete disagreement in an exam situation is like, you may want, or you can use that in real life, in real English. But in the exam, you have to keep it polite and nice, so maybe you should not completely disagree. You should at least concede that the interlocutor does have a point as well. Maybe you should use the next one. I agree up to a point, but as I mentioned, or as I said earlier, experience taught me that, or I read that, or I did some research into the topic and found out that, stuff like that. You could say that, however, I'm of a different opinion. I made the experience that. No, I'm not sure about that. I'm afraid I disagree. That is a polite way. Like, I completely disagree is not the register that you want to use in an exam situation. I'm afraid I disagree gets closer to what you should do. I'm afraid I disagree with you. I'm afraid I have to disagree with you on that, because the research I did on the topic clearly says that stuff like that is always good. You should also back up, be able to back up your opinion. So I'm afraid I disagree is a more polite way of saying I completely disagree. So you could totally use the I'm afraid I disagree thing in your exam. That would be totally acceptable. Quite polite and also quite high in register is that we don't seem to be in complete agreement here, or on this point. I don't know if I ever used that in like active conversation. I probably haven't. But then it sounds good. Well, you could. We don't seem to completely agree on that point. We don't seem to be in complete agreement. A very polite way of saying that you think that what your opposite said was wrong. Well, abstain from the I completely disagree. All the others are usable. They are like, you can totally use them in the exam. As I said, I hope, or I'm pretty sure that all the examiners will do that. I hope that they will give you something that you can disagree with, because, well, that gives you something to talk about. Or you could also ask them a question that you expect some disagreement on, because, well, yeah, it simply helps you fill the 15 minutes that you have to, or that you have to cover, like, with a discussion that is as real as possible. Discussion is a very good keyword. We will now very quickly try and do the dialogue and the follow-up task on the topic. I will take on the role as the interlocutor. So I'm the person who, well, I'm the examiner, basically. Chris will be the poor person who has to do his English A-levels for the, I don't know, 10th time in his life now, ever since he started to work for the Matura Express. He already did the monologue, so we're not gonna do the monologue thing. We're doing the dialogue now, and we will try to like find a way of agreeing and disagreeing with each other. I'm pretty sure that not with all of the topics and not with every dialogue you have that possibility, because sometimes that's just not how the conversation goes, I suppose. But we will try. Let's see what we make of the whole dialogue thing. and you see how the dialogue and the follow-up task could look like. Okay, so that's
Hello.
him. You know him, pretty sure. So as I said, he has done the monologue, so I know a lot about sports and a healthy lifestyle now. Thanks for your presentation earlier. There was some very nice input, some very nice food for thought. You mentioned the gym.
Yes.
Which is something that not everyone likes, I suppose. But also, apart from that, like we'll have to find out for ourselves. Apart from that, would you really say that it's something that is fitness for everyone? Like talking from a money perspective, you kind of made it sound that way, but
Yes, I'm totally convinced that it's for everyone, since even if you're not going to the gyms where it's super expensive, there are a lot of gyms, even in Innsbruck, where you can train very on a low budget actually. Of course, you have some differences in the gyms that you don't have that much barbells or any other machines you might use. But at the same time, if you want to invest money in it, you will get a lot of programs or a lot of training courses from the studio. So I think everyone who is interested in sports and in this field that they cover in the gym, so all the training courses, I think it's affordable. So,
okay. Well, yeah, I think that is a good point that I haven't considered that way. What about people, like you talked a lot about sports that everyone can do, like I can go running in the morning and stuff like that. What about people who don't find the motivation to do that on their own? Like, is there something that you could, sometimes we need a little group pressure kind of thing. Is that something that you would agree with, first of all, or do you think that helps? Have you made the experience that group sometimes helps a little?
Yeah, definitely. So I think for one of the most interesting things you can do, especially as a student, but also if you work in Innsbruck or just live in Innsbruck, do a course on whatever sports you like at the USI, which is the sports university, and then you have your group workouts. For example, you can do cross power, which is something similar to the trademark CrossFit.
Oh, nice.
Yes, and then you can do group trainings, and I think it's a big thing for doing sports, for especially if you're not like the person that thinks, I'm gonna go training, I'm gonna go have a run, or I don't know, a hike or something.
So you would definitely say that the group thing has some validity. You don't have to do stuff like that.
Totally agree with it.
Okay, well then that sounds like, I would be one of those persons, I guess, to need some the kick to like. One last thing about sports. Everything you mentioned, like you made excellent points in your monologue, and I agree with most of what you said. They all sound so time consuming. What am I gonna do if I don't have the time? Like, I have to work, I have to study.
Yeah, well. Time is everything that needs to be planned. So time managing nowadays especially has become a whole other topic than it was 30 years ago. We, especially if we would reduce the time we're on our phones and on social media, we would have more time to do more important things. For example, doing sports. Okay, if you have to work for 10 hours a day, you're not really motivated to do sports. But there are solutions. There are training programs that are designed that last 50 minutes, which are normally like high intensity programs, workout programs, and it is really exhausting, but it's even better than doing 1 hour of weightlifting workout. So,
Yes.
which
That's
is
just-
quite boring, I think.
I would have to agree
Yeah.
on that. Yeah, that's exactly like the point about the gym that I don't really like. You know, after like about 25 minutes, it's like, so what am I gonna do with
Yeah.
myself? So there is programs where I can get fit in very little time, and if I
Yes.
reduce like social media stuff and all the other distractions that there are, then I should be okay.
Yeah, would be a beginning actually to reduce, to focus on the essentials, what you really want to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good plan. How much time do you invest per day on sports? Like, as you seem to know so much about it, I assume that you invest quite a bit of
It
time into
depends. I'm always looking it as week-wise. So in every week I want to have certain amount of sports. It depends. On Monday and Tuesday there are courses I do which last 1 hour, and then maybe I go for a run on Friday and then hiking during the week or at the weekend.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is normally I want to approach the 4 times sports in 1 week.
Okay. So that is your rule of like thumb kind of for yourself. Well, that sounds very good. Thank you very much for all the very nice input on sports.
You're welcome. Thank you. So I'm gonna switch.
Okay, so that was what the dialogue could look like. That was a very good dialogue, I thought. One thing that went really well is, or that sometimes doesn't go that well, especially when people have to talk to me because I talk a lot, is that the examinee should always have more speaking time, obviously. Like, we are not assessing your interlocutor's English, but your English. So be prepared for them asking you questions, but they will definitely ask you questions that give you the opportunity to speak. Don't expect them to hold like a monologue about their lives and their life stories. That's not what they're gonna do. So they will keep their questions and also their agreement and disagreement short and precise, so as for you to like have enough speaking time and to prove how great your English is. Well, again, very brief recap of the most important points. In giving opinion, in agreement, but that's I think the easiest one, and especially in disagreement, write down some phrases, some chunks that you can work with. Use words that sound, or chunks that sound as if they came from you. Like, only say stuff or work with stuff that sounds as if it was like spontaneous, as if it just came to your mind spontaneously, naturally. If you learn all of them by heart without ever using them prior to the exam, it probably sounds as if you had learned them by heart, and it doesn't sound natural and it doesn't sound very convincing. So in your courses, try to practice that a little bit. I'm pretty sure you will be given the opportunity to do so. Write down the ones that you like. Write them down in one of the corners on your keyboard sheet, in a place that is strategically intelligent, a place that you look at very frequently, and try to include them as much as possible. Don't overdo it, but that is a different story. Use them once or twice so that your interlocutors know that you got the point of agreeing and disagreeing. Don't overdo it. Same goes for all the stylistic devices like linking words and so on and so forth. Yeah, and that was it from my side, I suppose. I hope we could give you some information, some input on the dialogue, some vocab input as well. Yeah, that was it. So we see each other again next Monday, and obviously there will be some input or some background information on what to expect in the exam, which is going to be an interesting